A legal group alleged that the state of Mississippi is denying good schools to African American students and is violating a federal law that enabled the state to rejoin the Union after the Civil War. The Southern Poverty Law Center wants a federal judge to force the state's leaders to comply with the 1870 law, which says Mississippi must never deprive any citizen of school rights and privileges. The group said the state has watered down education protections in a white supremacist effort to prevent the education of blacks.
Peace. God's peace be upon you. Thank you so much for joining me again today here at the Reimagine Schools, where we are changing the way we educate. And we are changing the way we educate by encouraging parents to become strong parent and community advocates on all things that are school and schooling. We are redesigning and redefining urban education for the benefit of African American students who are continuously dogged and hunted by the so-called achievement gap, which we understand as an opportunity gap. Now, today I want to talk to you about a very important lawsuit that you should keep your eye on and that you should follow. If you are not aware of the educational conditions in Mississippi for black children, you really need to go do some research, and you will not have to look very hard. It's not going to be a difficult thing. There have been many problems expressed over the years about the quality of education that black students receive in Mississippi. There have been complaints about the funding for many, many, many years, going back years. I remember not so long ago where certain school districts in Mississippi were ordered to desegregate. So it's been an ongoing issue that the African American or black community have experienced in that state for quite some time. So there was a lawsuit that was filed in May of 2017, and it was filed on behalf of 4 African American parents of students who attend school in Jackson, I believe Jackson, Mississippi, and the Southern Poverty Law Center filed the lawsuit on their behalf. And what they are suggesting, and what they are not suggesting, what they are saying is that Mississippi is denying good schools to African American students in violation of the federal law that enabled the state to rejoin the Union after the Civil War. Now, again, the Southern Poverty Law Center wants a federal judge to force state leaders to comply with the 1870 law, which says Mississippi must never deprive any citizen of the school rights and privileges described in the state's first post-Civil War Constitution. And I'm going to talk more about what that particular law stated, and we'll look at that. Okay. Now, the lawsuit was filed. The defendants are Governor Phil Bryant, the Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, House Speaker Philip Gunn, and Secretary of State Delbert Hosemann. They are all Republican elected officials. It also names State School Superintendent Kerry Wright and the 9 appointed members of the State Board of Education. Now, Mississippi's public schools have ranked at or near the bottom of national measures of academic achievement and progress for some time. But Mississippi's education system under the current governor and lieutenant governor have seen some improvement under their leadership. So it's important to say that. Now, I want to talk about what's this law. Okay. Again, this lawsuit seeks a declaration that Mississippi has failed to live up to obligations that it incurred in 1870 upon its readmission to the United States. You may recall that Mississippi and several other southern states seceded from the Union against the idea of abolishing slavery. So in 1870, upon its readmission to the United States, it had certain obligations that it had to fulfill in order to be readmitted. Now, Mississippi's readmission required it to maintain, and I quote, a uniform system of free public schools, end quote. It was a commitment that was enshrined in the state's 1868 Constitution, intended to ensure that the former slaves of school age and their descendants would receive an education equal to that received by white students. Now, since 1890, when Mississippi rewrote its constitution in order to reestablish white supremacy, Mississippi has violated the terms of its readmission. As a result, black students in Mississippi still do not receive an education equal to that received by white students. Now, on December 10th, 1817, Congress admitted Mississippi into the United States of America. For the next half century, slave labor drove Mississippi's economy. By 1860, 436,631 slaves lived in Mississippi, and that was approximately 55% of the state's population. 55% of the state's population by 1860 were enslaved people. Okay? On January 9th, 1861, following Abraham Lincoln's election to the presidency, Mississippi became the second state to secede from the Union. Its declaration of the immediate causes which induce and justify the succession of the state of Mississippi from the federal union, and that is a mouthful, left no doubt as to its motivation. And that declaration states, and I quote, "Our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest of the world. Its labor supplies the product which constitutes by far the largest and most important portions of commerce of the earth. These products are peculiar to the climate virgin on the tropical regions, and by an imperious law of nature, none but the black race can bear exposure to the tropical sun. These products have become necessities of the world, and a blow at slavery is a blow at commerce and civilization. That blow has been long aimed at the institution and was at the point of reaching its consummation. There was no choice left but submission to the mandates of abolition or dissolution of the Union, whose principles have been subverted to work out our ruin." End quote. That quote is very interesting in so many ways. When we're talking about civilization, a blow at civilization, maintaining slavery would be a blow at civilization. It's the most uncivilized thing that I've ever known. I don't know, maybe you could tell me something else. And certainly the idea that only the black race can bear exposure to the tropical sun. Well, it certainly doesn't look like that when you go out on any beach on any given day. I don't see any black people laying out in the sun trying to get sun exposure, but that's neither here nor there. But wow, that was ridiculous. But that's what they believed during that time, okay? Less than a month later, Mississippi and 5 other states formed the Confederate States of America. Now, on February 18th, 1861, Jefferson Davis, who was a Mississippi slave owner, who believed that African Americans were, I quote, "our inferior fitted expressly for servitude," end quote, was inaugurated as the president of the Confederacy. 80,000 Mississippians fought in the Civil War to maintain slavery, and their casualties were very heavy. The war lasted 4 years, and it cost 620,000 American lives. On May 9th, 1865, President Andrew Johnson declared that armed resistance and insurrection against the United States was virtually at an end. On May 10th, the following day, 1865, Jefferson Davis was captured, and the Civil War was over. Now, on January 7th, 1868, Mississippi assembled a constitutional convention to draft a new charter. And African Americans, including former slaves, were among the delegates. And that was the first time in the state's history that black people participated in the political process at all. At the convention, delegates offered many proposals for the establishment of public schools. But in the end, the convention settled on an education clause that ensured that it would establish a uniform system of free public schools by taxation or otherwise for all children between the ages of 5 and 21 years, and shall, as soon as practicable, establish schools of higher grade. And that's what they agreed upon in 1868. Now, the convention adopted the new constitution, including that education clause, on May 15, 1865. Okay? By popular referendum, the Constitution was ratified on December 1st, 1869. Less than 3 months later, Congress passed Mississippi's Readmission Act and returned Mississippi to full statehood, but only on certain fundamental conditions. And one of these conditions was, quote, that the Constitution of Mississippi shall never be so amended or changed as to deprive any citizen or class of citizens, of the United States of the school rights and privileges secured by the Constitution of said state, end quote. Now, history is replete with details of Mississippi's failure to keep its obligations. Within a generation, Mississippi, tongue-tied, Mississippi jettisoned the 1868 Constitution in favor of a new constitution designed principally to resubjugate African Americans. The adoption of the Constitution of 1890, along with subsequent amendments in 1934, 1960, and 1987, deprived African American children of the very school rights that Congress sought to protect with the Readmission Act. Now, this lawsuit that has been filed on behalf of these 4 African American parents seeks redress from these particular violations. Now, let's just give a little overview of the lawsuit itself. Now, this case seeks to bring the state of Mississippi into compliance with its federal obligation under the Readmission Act to protect the school's rights and privileges of its children. Okay, and the reason for the lawsuit is simple. And it's a quote here. It says, "Today, education is perhaps the most important function of state and local governments. Compulsory school attendance laws and the great expenditures for education both demonstrate our recognition of the importance of education to our democratic society. It is required in the performance of our most basic public responsibilities, even service in the armed forces. It is the very foundation of good citizenship. Today, it is a principal instrument in awakening the child to cultural values and preparing him for later professional training and in helping him to adjust normally to his environment. In these days, it is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if he is denied the opportunity of an education. Such an opportunity, where the state has undertaken to provide it, is a right which must be available to all on equal terms." And that's actually a quote from the Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. Okay, this lawsuit, which seeks to vindicate the promise set forth in Brown versus Board of Education and to end one of Mississippi's surviving vestiges of Jim Crow, stems from the Act of February 23rd, 1870, which the Readmission Act, again, which forbade Mississippi from amending its 1868 Constitution to deprive any class of children, and in particular African American children, of their rights to a uniform system of free public schools. After the Civil War ended in 1865, Congress began readmitting the former Confederate states to the Union one by one. To prevent these southern states from drafting constitutions that failed to protect the rights of newly freed slaves, Congress enacted these laws known as Readmission Acts that conditioned re-entry into the Union. And in Mississippi's case, those conditions related to voting and education. Again, Mississippi was readmitted to the Union on February 23, 1870, provided that they respect the conditions of their readmission clause. Okay? And I've already listed for you the different times that they amended their constitution in order to subjugate African American people, subjugate them, if you will. Okay? So now let's get into some of the things that the plaintiffs have suggested has taken place. Okay, let's see here. Again, the attorney Will Bardwell is the person who filed on behalf of the 4 African American mothers, and these 4 African American mothers have children in the public elementary schools in Mississippi, and they are seeking equal opportunities and outcomes. Their attorney, Will Bardwell, says that Mississippi leaders are welcome to comply without increasing spending if they can. He says, "I'm filing this suit because the state has an obligation to make the schools that black kids attend equal to the schools that white kids attend." Okay, actually, that was a quote from Indigo Williams. That was Indigo Williams, the parent of a first grade boy at Raines Elementary School in West Jackson, who stated that why she was filing the lawsuit. Her attorney is Will Bardwell. She was the one who actually made that comment. All 19 Mississippi school districts rated F by the Mississippi Department of Education have an overwhelmingly African American student population, while the state's 5 highest performing school districts are predominantly white. And that information was provided by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Now, the schools attended by the plaintiff's children lack textbooks, literature, basic supplies, experienced teachers, sports, and other extracurricular activities, tutoring programs, and even toilet paper. The Southern Poverty Law Center says that's, come on now, that's absurd, and it sounds so much like what life was like for so many schools during segregation, where there was a lack of textbooks or literature and basic supplies. There was sports were non-existent, extracurricular activities were non-existent. These are the same sounding conditions from before integration. And here we are, and this was in 2017 when this lawsuit was filed, learning that the motivation for this lawsuit are the same conditions that were occurring during the time of segregation. I certainly hope, and I'm sure you do, that these parents and these students receive justice, that they are given the demands that they're asking, which is simply give my child the same education as you give anyone else. Allow my child to have the same opportunities for success as anyone else. If you are someone who is considering entering the field of education, and I certainly hope that you are, I can tell you that Mississippi is a place that is in need of some assistance from those individuals who are committed to the education of all those individuals who are ready to roll up their sleeves to come in and do some good work to help those families and those children in Mississippi. So certainly, I have been discussing the importance of African American students having experience and with being taught by African American teachers. I've talked about all the reports that support that, but certainly here is an example of where you can put, service in, where you can kind of put your money where your mouth is. So if you are thinking about getting in the field of education, I certainly hope you are being inspired to do so, because you can see that there are areas where we really need help to assure that our children are receiving the best education that will allow them to compete with anyone in the world. So let us please hope that this case will get the justice that it certainly deserves. Let's keep our eye on this, because this case, and you can guarantee it, this case is going to be, however the outcome is, and we want it to be successful, this case is going to influence other cases that are going to come. Because sometimes you have to, take it to court, and you got to hit people where it hurts, but in their pocket, in their reputation, or whatever it may be, by bringing this information to light. Certainly, we would not know about these conditions if we didn't know about this case. So keep your eye on this case. Follow it. Do your research. Always do your research. Don't take another person's word for it. Even mine. I would never deceive you, but still, I want you to do your research about what really it's like to attend some of these schools that I've been talking to you about, so that you can understand and you can pick up that sense of urgency if we have to do something. So I hope that this information was helpful to you. I hope that it has inspired you in one way or the other to seek for justice for those who have been dealt with unjustly. So thank you so much. Please like, share, and subscribe. Most importantly, share this information so that others are aware. We have to become more aware of what is going on in our broader communities, because these are a part of our community as well. Again, thank you. Peace to you. God's peace to you, and you are obligated to keep the peace.